Hi everyone, and welcome to the second of the Better Places for People webinars as part of World Green Building Week. You've joined us today for a discussion around a healthy approach to certification. It's a real pleasure to have so many of you with us today, and we hope that you'll enjoy contributing throughout the session. If you have questions for our speakers, then please do write them directly in the chat box, and we'll pick these up throughout the session. Or if you have comments to share with the wider world, then please do tweet us. Please use the hashtags Better Places for People, hashtag World Green Building Week, and say hello to us at World GBC. Now, the structure of our session today will include a short introduction from me, and then we'll be handing straight over to our 5 speakers in today's session for a brief insight into each of their areas of expertise, before we open up into a wider discussion, including audience Q&A. So to start the introductions, I'm Katrina Brady, Head of Better Places for People, which is one of the global projects of the World Green Building Council. The World Green Building Council are a global network consisting of over 70 national green building councils. Our membership totals around 50,000 individuals and organisations, and we engage our membership around achieving green buildings for everyone, everywhere. Now, Better Places for People is one of the global projects of the World Green Building Council. And this project is aimed at increasing the demand and supply of green buildings, which are supportive of the health, well-being and productivity of the people within them. Now, we know that the health and well-being trend has been growing massively in the building industry across the world, with demand growing for buildings that support people and planet. And green building certifications have played a huge part in this in recent years and have helped us to grow the green building agenda globally. Now, within our network of green building councils, we know there are over 40 different rating tools being used and many more available beyond that which serve different geographies and building requirements. Each rating tool offers its own unique challenges and opportunities, and so there is this huge variety of options available in the market. But I think we can all agree that it does come with an element of confusion. Now, some of the questions that we hear most often when it comes to discussions around health and well-being in green buildings is about certification, ranging from, is it better to do a green or a healthy certification, to how much do these rating tools overlap, and then the question we get most, which one is the best option for my project? Now, in order to answer some of these questions and to provide an insight into a global sample of healthy and sustainable building rating tools, we have 5 great panellists on board for this session to share their insights and expertise. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our 5 panellists for today, who have joined us for a discussion around a healthy approach to certification. First, we'll hear from Martin Townsend, who is the Director of Sustainability at the BRE based in London, and will be representing BREEAM in our discussion. BREEAM is the world's longest established sustainability rating tool for buildings, published in 1990, and boasts 250,000 buildings certified across 50 countries. Next, we've got Reena Agarwal, who is the Chief Operating Officer at the Centre for Active Design and based in New York. The Centre for Active Design was launched by Michael Bloomberg in 2011 and is the operator for FITWEL, a certification focused on occupant health and well-being. Jorge Chapa is Head of Market Transformation for the Green Building Council of Australia, who manage their Green Star rating tool. Green Star was launched in 2003, and to date more than 1,900 projects around Australia have achieved the certification. Jessica Cooper is the Chief Commercial Officer for the International Well Building Institute and is representing the Well Building Standard in today's discussions. The Well Standard was launched in 2013 and was the first global standard to focus exclusively on health and well-being. Finally, Kelly Worden is a Health Research Manager at the US Green Building Council, and she also oversees their activities related to their Green Health Partnership. Kelly will represent LEED in today's discussion, which has grown to be one of the largest global certification systems since its establishment in 1993. Now, after all the panellists have given a short introductory presentation, we will then have a dedicated discussion and Q&A session to close the webinar. Please do pose any questions for our panellists in the chat box throughout the session, as well as joining the conversation on Twitter. So it gives me great pleasure now to hand over to our first speaker. Martin, over to you.
My name is Martin Townsend, and thank you for inviting me here today. So good morning, or even good afternoon, depending on where in the world you are. So for those who know me, talking about BREEAM for 5 minutes is a big challenge, because I could easily talk for many hours on the subject. So I don't want to just talk about BREEAM, because I think for those who are joining us in this call on this webinar, I think it's about giving you confidence that what you need to hear from me is not just simply about the BREEAM process, but also ensuring that you have confidence that rating tools continue to evolve. I think rating tools have a very long history, an important history for us as an organization, but actually that history is no template for our future. Our buildings are becoming much more complicated. The way we operate as organizations and as we work internationally, the way we look at our buildings and the materials we use and the supply chains we have are now far more complicated. Katrina, so I can't see the screen, but if you could put on the second slide, which is the pictures, that would be fantastic. As I said, BRE has been around for almost 100 years. And actually, when we first started back in 1921, the world was a simple place. The standards and the work we did was a much more easier sort of industry to understand. If we fast forward to today, and actually the way we look at our buildings, the industry is going through some incredibly important transformation at the moment. The bottom picture, hopefully on your screen, is a photograph taken quite recently of the BRE Innovation Park. So when we talk about rating tools, the unique thing about BRE is we don't just create our schemes and write our standards. We actually do lots of physical testing and lots of physical research to make sure that the standard that we have is based on true science. And so as a research charity, it is about helping the industry to actually create buildings on our site, to test them, to make sure that they are the buildings that the industry is building, and to make sure that we are driving that change. And so the standards that we write from a BREEAM perspective are based on that industry first-hand experience. But I think what is important to share as well is when we start to look at the world, it's about making sure that when we talk about sustainability, it isn't just a conversation that's happening in mature markets. It's a conversation that is very active worldwide. So if you could put the next slide up. When we look at the work we do, it's about making sure that the conversation around sustainability and the schemes that we write support the world in terms of the challenges they face. And so the slide you're seeing on your screen now is about QSANs, which is the work we're doing in countries where they're probably not as fortunate as us, where they've gone through some form of natural disaster, to make sure that the conversation about building physics, research, the latest thinking about resilience, making sure we drive change in a conversation that is inclusive and not exclusive, I think is really important. Also on that same slide, what you'll see as well is an infographic about some of the research that we do. As I mentioned earlier on, to write standards which are basically the right standards, it's about ensuring that we engage academia to make sure that we do the research to help us and support us to move the debate forward. So at the moment, we've got about 140 PhDs, which we support. We have a number of universities that are in our network, so that as we support and write standards, we are doing it in a way that is supported by academia. It's about giving the industry confidence that as we look to change in a way that is based on knowledge and research. But an important ingredient of the process of change as well is not just about the knowledge. It's about collaboration, and I think today's webinar is a good demonstration of that. We've done a lot of work in terms of crosswalking with FITWEL and IWBI and other organizations, because the narrative of change has to be about collaboration. It has to be about making sure that we give the industry constant messages and consistent messages in terms of what does good look like. So on the next slide, if you could move the slide forward, if we are looking to support the industry to improve, it is about making sure that voluntary standards in the marketplace have a place to play, and actually they sit alongside regulation. It is about making sure that we support the industry to improve. So market transformation and supporting the industry to improve is important. But equally, it's about making sure that we create standards that drive low impact, but also low costs. So making sure we understand how we can design buildings that are sustainable, that are efficient, are healthy buildings, but actually don't have the high costs. In that conversation as well, we need to see it across the whole life cycle of buildings. So from a BREEAM perspective, is about communities and infrastructure and new construction in use, refurbishment, and appreciating as well that there is a life cycle approach here. How do we do this in a way that looks at circular economy, making sure that the buildings that are designed are performing as they should do, so the performance gap becomes important. And then on my last slide, what I think is important in this conversation, that standards need to continue to evolve. One of the things which I think is important in the last few years is the role of the consumer, and how do we create metrics that the consumer understands. What does good look like? That's easy to do from a domestic perspective in terms of housing, but how do we bring tenants, how do we bring people into the office environment into the conversation? So when it comes to sustainability, there is a demand drive for better buildings, for better, healthier spaces. That conversation, I think, is incredibly important. And then central to that process is transparency and data sharing, but making sure that we really understand sustainability is a conversation which is inclusive, but it's also a conversation which has a language which is positive. So enough for me, I think.
Great, thank you so much, Martin.
No problem.
And I'm sure everyone will agree. It's lovely to see the evolution of the BRE and BREEAM over the past, I suppose, century.
Yes.
And I look forward to hearing more in the Q&A.
Brilliant.
So let's go across the Atlantic now, and we'll hear next from Reena, representing FITWEL.
Great, thank you, Katrina and Martin. Good morning, everyone. It's great to chat, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this webinar. As an introduction, since we are the newest certification system available on the market, I figured I would give an introduction to us as an organization, the Center for Active Design. Oh, there we go. So we are an international not-for-profit organization. As Katrina said, we were launched by Mayor Michael Bloomberg at the end of his administration in New York City, with the mission of elevating health as a priority within design and development practices. So we really do that in a variety of ways outside of FITWEL. We do original research. We translate scholarly public health research into design and development strategies that can be used as practical solutions for the industry. Jumping right into FITWEL. FITWEL has a vision for a healthier future where every building is enhanced to support the well-being of its occupants. And here I wanted to point out the equity that is important to us as a not-for-profit organization. It's critical to us that every building, regardless of size, year built, or location, has the opportunity to apply FITWEL to its building portfolio. So FITWEL was developed by the US federal government, specifically the two agencies, one that is charged with protecting our nation's public health, and the second that is charged with operating its federal building portfolio. So the two agencies came together and developed FITWEL over a period of 5 years, and the Center for Active Design was selected as the operator of FITWEL in 2016. The federal government spent about 5 years developing FITWEL, looking at about 3,000 peer-reviewed research studies. They consulted with experts in public health and design to come up with the 55 plus strategies that are included in the FITWEL system. Sorry, just waiting for the slide to advance. So each of FITWEL strategies is based on its impact on one of the 7 health impact categories that you see on the screen. So essentially, those strategies that have a higher level of impact based on the evidence behind it are scored higher in the FITWEL system. So essentially, that means the stronger the impact of the strategy is equated to more points within the system. So you can see some of the samples of the impacts of these strategies, but we look at community health, reduction in morbidity and absenteeism, and this really has to do with the upward trend of chronic diseases globally, the impact of social equity on vulnerable populations, physical activity, impact on occupant safety, healthy food, and then finally well-being. And well-being really has to do with mental health. So a couple of things on what makes FITWEL unique. It is cost effective. So what I mentioned before is that it was developed by the federal government, which means that all of the research and development costs were put in by the federal government, and we can pass on those savings to our users. So we charge a flat fee of $6,500 per project, making that lowering that barrier of entry and allowing every building to apply the certification system. There are no prerequisites to FITWEL, which really means that every building has a unique opportunity to apply those strategies that are unique to its particular context. What I mentioned before is that FITWEL is based on a weighted point system, which means that as the science evolves, we can change the scoring and keep up to date with the latest research. It's applicable across a portfolio. So we've invested a lot of money in our technology, which I'll show you a brief insight into later on. But there's many features that allow you to apply those strategies, which are applicable to many buildings across your portfolio, one time throughout the certification process. We offer many different scorecards for different project types. So commercial interior spaces, single tenant buildings, both the core and the entirety of a multi-tenant building. And then in November 2017, we launched a scorecard for multifamily residential spaces. This is a quick highlight of our FITWEL portal, which projects use to advance through the certification process. What I want to point out here is that we really strive to make the data accessible to our users. So in the first a couple of examples that I show is that you can see at a glance how your company is impacting one of the 7 health impact categories, or how the project within your company is impacting those projects, those health impact categories as well. This slide's talking about the alignment across various sustainability systems that we have. So we have crosswalks with BREEAM and BOMA. FITWEL is also a recognized partner in GRESB and can garner points within the GRESB system. We have a partnership with Underwriters Laboratory, where UL has a product certification system. Thereby, those users who want to use both UL and FITWEL can impact the entirety of their project. And finally, for those users in the US, we have a partnership with Fannie Mae. So affordable housing properties that apply FITWEL receive a 15 basis point reduction on their loans, which is quite a great financial incentive. And so we've seen a lot of uptake in the affordable housing market here. I am not, Katrina, I'm not able to advance to the next slide, but if you want to just advance to the last slide for me, that'd be great. So this is the last slide. I just want to talk about some of our global traction. We launched about a year and a half ago to the public market. We have about 600 projects going through the certification process in about 25 countries. Here you can see a sampling of some of our users. And that is it. And I think I'm right at about 5 minutes, so I will stop here and take some questions and Q&A as well.
Great, thank you, Reena. And you're right, perfectly to time. And it's great for us to see, I think, that there's already an official partnership between even the first 2 certifications that we've heard from today. And it's so impressive to see the number of champions and advisors and partnerships that you guys have amassed in the last few years. So yeah, as you said, more on that later. And now let's move over to Jorge Chapa, speaking to us from the Green Building Council of Australia.
Thank you, Katrina, and good evening, everyone, all the way from Australia. My name is Jorge Chapa. I am the head of market transformation at the Green Building Council of Australia, and I'm going to be talking to you about Green Star. Now, out of all of the rating systems that you'll hear about today, Green Star is rather unique in that it essentially, for what it's worth, doesn't have global ambitions. Green Star was very much created and developed for the Australian market. And while Green Star is used in Africa and New Zealand, we don't manage that rating system. The New Zealand Green Building Council does in New Zealand, and the Green Building Council of South Africa does that for the African region. And they manage it slightly different to ours. So what I'm going to talk to you today is about Green Star and how it's worked in Australia. Katrina, I'm having trouble managing the slides. If you don't mind moving to the next slide. Thank you. So what is Green Star? Green Star is a holistic rating system. It is a rating system that encompasses a vast number of issues, depending on the sector that it is trying to apply. We do aim to make sure that Green Star continues to be an internationally recognized rating system. While the application is very much Australian, part of the implication is making sure that it does continue to represent best practice and world leadership. Next slide. In Australia, there's around 2,000 projects that have Green Star certification. That means that we've certified effectively a rather large amount of buildings, from, say, supermarkets to office buildings, all the way down to the Sydney Opera House, which you can see on the bottom right corner. 2,000 buildings doesn't sound like much, but when one considers the size of the Australian economy and the size of the Australian population, it actually turns out to be probably one of the highest, if not the highest, number of ratings on a per capita basis. And if you exclude the residential sector, which we don't tend to play in very strongly. Green Star has effectively 4 rating tools. Next slide, please, Katrina. Green Star applies to precinct scales through Green Star communities, new construction through design and as-built, fit outs through Green Star interiors, and existing buildings through Green Star performance. I'm just to try and keep within the 5 minutes that I have, I am only going to briefly discuss Green Star design and as-built. But the important thing to consider and to note is that the issue of health and well-being certification is not just something that you do at one scale. You have to obviously look at how it applies throughout. And so if you can very briefly go to the next slide, when we look at Green Star design and as-built, we're looking at the design and construction of new buildings. In our case, that tool set applies to all building sectors in Australia that are occupiable. So Green Star design and as-built currently applies to everything from, say, stadiums all the way to train stations, including commercial office buildings, retail, hotels, and so on. Next slide. In this slide, what you're going to see is the content of Green Star design and as-built. Now, when we've looked at what health is, it's very easy to be tempted by the idea that it should only be about indoor environment quality. But when we design the rating tool and we work through the rating tool, we actually look at the health impacts throughout. And so, for example, you'll see in the areas that I've highlighted that we include issues of commissioning and tuning, which, while it doesn't have a direct impact itself, it manages building-related issues that do have a health impact. You'll also notice that we have a responsible construction practices, for example. So we introduced a requirement to address the health and well-being of the people that are building the building on site, so mental and health and well-being issues. And that cycles throughout the rating tool all the way to our innovation category, which includes aspects that are much broader than just the standard building system issues, and include things like universal design, the quality of amenities, ergonomics, and so on, that are slightly broader than that. Now, I won't go into the specific detail. I thought I'd give you a bit of a breakdown of a specific project. Next slide. This is my favorite building in all of Australia. I will say I really, really like this building. And as you can see from the picture, it's actually not very interesting. But if you actually go through most rating systems, holistic rating systems, you could actually design a building that looks like this. And that's one of the challenges to be mindful of. Rating systems themselves don't necessarily give you a good outcome. These are the former offices of Medibank Private, and they're a health insurer. And these aren't Green Star rated, I will say that. But they were obviously looking at trying to improve their health of their staff, and they wanted to move to brand new offices. So next slide. So they went through a process of ensuring that health was brought from the beginning. And that inclusion of health at the practitioner level meant that they needed to reconceptualize how they delivered a building that was still a workable, commercially viable building, but provided a significant amount of benefits to their stakeholder. And they used Green Star as a framework to try and drive some of these health outcomes. And that was very valuable, but it did require also the consultants to deliver a great building. So next slide, please. And what you're seeing here is what that building looks like. And this is the interior of the Medibank private building in Melbourne. And what you'll see as soon as it comes up on the screen, there we go, is the very colorful and interactive way that that building just lets people behave. And it's really been designed with health in mind. The aspect of activity moving throughout the space through active workplaces. Next slide. The distinct working areas that you'll see in those slides with distinct lighting situations, lighting that adjusts based on the time of day, and the colorfulness of the designs. These are situations that enable good health and well-being that do require the consultants to be part of this approach. It is an intent that needs to drive this and working with the client to achieve it. Simply following Green certification process doesn't necessarily achieve this. And it's going from these spaces, which are very colorful, to the next slide, please, Katrina, to places that are also very nature intensive and having that aspect of the warm timber framed timber places, having plants in spaces in quieter areas that are full of daylight. And those are the things about the quality of amenities that drive much better health and well-being outcomes that need to be considered as well. This building's a bit crazy for what it's worth. Next slide. You can see that, and you would have seen on the previous picture, that it has a lot of movement, or it's designed to encourage people to move around. Sorry, just click 3 times to go past the animation. And you'll see that there's the stairs. You'll see in the middle one, this is one of my favorite things, the way that you enter through the building, you can go in with your bike and you go all the way to the 3rd floor. And just because I do genuinely think that all rating systems should do this, I reckon all of us should have a credit that encourages playing tennis in your own building. So that's a goal of ours. And so that's something that I want to leave you with. Next slide. It's not just the rating systems that deliver good health and well-being outcomes. It really does rely on the consultants being able to deliver this, but the rating systems can provide you with a good framework to make sure that you are addressing all of the relevant issues to promote health and well-being solutions. And that's something very much so worthwhile thinking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jorge, and in particular for sharing that case study with us. I'm sure we can all agree that looks like a beautifully designed building, and I'm very envious of the tennis courts.
I can assure you that everyone is very envious of the tennis courts.
Maybe better for the Australian climate than where some of us are listening in from, though.
Oh, I don't know. It's Melbourne. It gets very chilly and windy, but yeah, you know, it still works. It's a gorgeous building. It's a great building to go and see if you get a chance. Unfortunately, you do need to, and they don't do building tours anymore. But it used to be a very popular place to just go and visit.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I'd like to hand over now to Jessica Cooper of IWBI to talk to us now about the WELL building standard.
Excellent. Thank you, Catriona and Jorge. So WELL is focused on health, solely focused on health. So I'm just going to spend a quick minute on why this matters in looking at what impacts our health outcomes and acknowledging how much time we spend indoors and in analyzing how much we are worth as people. It's clear just how important the healthy building movement really is. The majority of our health outcomes are impacted by the places we spend time and the people we spend time with, as well as our lifestyle and behavioral choices. And because we spend 90% or more of our time indoors, the interior environment is a very important influencer. Now, businesses spend about 90% of their annual operating budget on their most expensive and important asset, their people. Yet approximately 85% of people don't participate in workplace wellness programs that are offered. Next slide. But a healthy environment guarantees 100% participation. Every person benefits just by being in a well-certified space or a healthy building, where the healthy choice is the easy choice and even the default choice. WELL focuses on performance outcomes and utilizes the built environment as a platform to improve human health, happiness, and productivity. With WELL, it is our goal to improve performance across 3 dimensions. The building should be performing better. The air should be fresher and the water cleaner. Visually, acoustically, and thermally, the space should be more comfortable. The people should be performing better. They should be more satisfied, more engaged, and more productive. They should be happier. And finally, the businesses should be performing better. There should be a return on investment. We believe that the healthy building movement is the second wave of sustainability for buildings. Addressing human health and planetary health is the holistic approach. And to make this as seamless as possible, WELL works in conjunction with global green building rating systems. Look for our crosswalks with LEED and BREEAM, Green Star, and Living Building Challenge to understand how achievement for a WELL feature will provide achievement in the corresponding program. Focused solely on human health, WELL takes a comprehensive and holistic approach. Each of the 10 concepts is addressed through design strategies, building operational policies, wellness programming, and performance outcomes. WELL buildings are tested to confirm that the air you breathe and the water you drink is healthy. They also keep you moving and nourished throughout the day. WELL projects are designed to maximize daylight and support the circadian rhythm and celebrate views to the outside. Material toxicity is minimized, but thermal and acoustical comfort are optimized. Various aspects of the project will also support cognitive health and a connection with the community. WELL recommends hundreds of strategies, but the most important outcome is for the project to meet the fundamental health intent of each feature. As such, WELL rewards projects for finding innovative ways to optimize well-being or for developing alternate strategies for meeting health outcomes. We encourage projects around the world to reference the equivalent codes and standards that are local to their project. A thorough review and verification process ensures that this flexibility is paired with integrity. All projects must undergo on-site testing to confirm they're performing as intended. This includes a visual inspection and measurement of environmental quality metrics. You can't know or manage what you don't measure. We've seen many projects make further improvements following their on-site verification process. Now, admittedly, our holistic and performance-based approach can take some effort to ensure success. You've got to stick with your physical fitness regimen to build those muscles, and sometimes you just need a coach to support you along the way. So to optimize your experience with WELL, we pair every registered project with the coaching contact from our team of technical experts. Delivering high-touch customer support, the WELL coaching contact will help you develop successful strategies and also ensure that you have access to all of the necessary tools and resources. We've also got a plethora of materials available on our website. Check out our articles and webinars for project and people profiles, tips on making the business case, technical overviews of feature requirements, market adoption updates, and new research. We also make a range of resources available via our digital library. Look for sample presentations, the performance verification and certification guidebooks, as well as consulting tools like project checklists and documentation templates. With this strong foundation, we are still evolving the product every day, making adjustments based on input from the growing movement. On May 31st, we launched the WELL version 2 pilot, which is designed to grow in specificity and specialty over time. The platform adapts to accommodate diverse space types and geographies and can also respond to new evidence and ever-evolving public health concerns. WELL v2 is global, and the criteria can be adjusted to focus on local perspectives. We've identified efficiencies to drive the cost down for all projects. WELL v2 is customizable, and the project teams select features based on what will have the greatest impact and provide the most value. We've also improved feasibility and usability for new project types, including existing buildings. And WELL v2 has impact. We've expanded the feature strategies, providing projects with more ways to comply, but still we've maintained our commitment to verified performance and enhanced our focus on ongoing measurement and creating metrics for success. WELL v2 has less preconditions and more optimizations, which means that project teams have multiple options as to how they meet their goals. Projects will implement the features that are most relevant, making selections based on their location, building use types, building constraints, health concerns, and wellness goals. At IWBI, we recognize that wellness is a journey and not necessarily a final destination. You don't go to the gym once, call it quits, and expect to have results. With WELL v2, we're taking steps to reward ongoing and incremental improvement. And for example, we've introduced Well DNO, an early phase review to recognize the commitment you have in place. This new and very affordable opportunity helps make you confident that you're on the right track and helps you tell your tenants, employees, and investors that you're committed to building for health. And finally, while we've maintained our commitment to performance verification, we've made some changes that improve the process. For example, Well v2 introduces greater sophistication and accuracy to protocols and equipment used in the well performance testing. Thanks to BRE for their partnership in refining this process. We're also giving projects the opportunity to engage with local service providers called performance testing agents for the on-site performance testing. Trainings will begin before the end of the year around the world. Since launch just a few short years ago, WELL has become internationally recognized as a pathway for improving health through buildings. This past year, we formally established partnerships with many regional green building councils to support WELL localization efforts. Our global network is growing, with projects in 37 countries and people accredited or studying for their WELL AP in 74 countries. WELL has been quite popular outside of North America, but also outside of North America, in Europe, Australia, and Asia. Many of our early adopters are leadership organizations whose commitment to their people has led them to WELL's rigorous, comprehensive, and performance-based approach. They span across multiple sectors, paving the way for many projects to come. Thanks, everyone. And now I'll turn it over to Kelly at USGBC.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's so incredible to see the geographical spread and diversity of WELL projects that have come across in just the last few years, and to have surpassed the 1,000 project mark is a huge achievement. So congratulations to you all. But yeah, as you've just said, let's hand over to our final speaker for today, Kelly Worden from USGBC, to talk to us about LEAD.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for having me. So, yes, my name is Kelly Worden. I lead health research efforts at the U.S. Green Building Council. As Katrina mentioned, I'm also the co-PI of the Green Health Partnership Research and Development Initiative that's established between the University of Virginia School of Medicine and the U.S. Green Building Council, with funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, which is a large public health philanthropy here in the U.S. And so I'll talk about a few of our tools towards the end of the presentation as well. But as was mentioned, the first version of the LEAD rating system was released in 1998, and since then, LEAD has become the most widely used green building program in the world. As with other rating systems discussed, we've got versions of the LEAD rating system that apply to all different types of projects, building types, and neighborhoods at various phases of development. So for those that aren't familiar with LEAD, LEAD is a concise framework for identifying and implementing practical and measurable green building design, construction, operation, and maintenance strategies and solutions. And as you might be familiar, if you have engaged with the U.S. Green Building Council or been to Green Build recently, we're really focused on all buildings, spaces, and places, and we want to make sure that we're providing a rating system that is applicable to buildings and places of all types at all phases of development. So you'll be able to find the various rating systems and associated reference guides on our website. But I just wanted to make sure that we're starting off at a point where, in terms of the certification process itself, it's pretty straightforward, similar to the other rating systems that have been discussed. So you'd basically first choose which version of the rating system is most applicable to your project, register that project, submit your documentation that would undergo review by GBCI, and then receive that final certification. And just a real quick point on the evolution of LEAD. So as we just heard from IWBI, WELL is in their second version. Similarly, LEAD has gone through a few different versions. And the most recent version of which is LEAD v4, which was released a few years ago, and really took a bold step towards more outcome-oriented and performance-based. And as I'll mention towards the end, we are actually right now working on tweaking that a little bit and actually coming out with a LEAD v4.1. So each LEED rating system is comprised of a series of prerequisites and credits that fall within these overarching credit categories. And so in order to become LEED certified, projects must satisfy a particular number of points. And as the more points that you receive, the higher the rating in terms of silver, gold, or platinum. But the real thing that I wanted to highlight for our purposes today are the underlying LEED impact categories that drive the rating system. And so as you'll see on this slide, the LEED rating system contains strategies that are meant to reverse contribution to climate change, enhance health and well-being, protect water resources, protect biodiversity, promote sustainability, build a greener economy, and enhance community and social equity. And here's a slide that actually looks at how the weight that these various impact categories are given within LEED v4, the most recent version of the rating system. And similar to actually how Reena was discussing the weights behind the FITWEL program, the decision to weight these different impact categories was a consensus-driven process that's based both on the severity of the global issue and the potential positive or negative impact of the built environment on that issue. So for instance, a global problem that the built environment strongly contributes to, such as climate change, is given a larger percentage of the 100 total points relative to the other impact categories. So this means that effects resulting from other impact categories may be less severe, less certain, operate at a smaller scale, or perhaps the built environment has less of an ability to actually solve that defined problem. So, but one particular thing I wanted to highlight here is actually along the lines of what Jorge was discussing, that while you can see that human health is an explicit impact category that's given a weight of 20%, of course the other impact categories matter for health as well. Climate change is a critical public health challenge at the global scale. Human life is absolutely reliant on access to clean water and so forth. And so what we're hoping to do with the LEED rating system is really encourage a holistic consideration of all of these different issues that really matter both for human health and the environment. Another thing that I typically emphasize, particularly when talking with my public health colleagues, is that LEED is a highly flexible rating system, which means that project teams can pick and choose the combination of credits that best suits their project. This is great from a user perspective, but what that means from an impact perspective is that not every LEED certified building is the same. You can reach different levels of certification with a different combination of emphasis on these overarching impact categories, which means that you don't necessarily need to achieve all of the strategies within the rating system that are directly relevant for human health. So recognizing this a few years ago, our Green Health Partnership research and development team that I mentioned previously partnered with a few organizations here in the United States, Enterprise Community Partners, which has a rating system available for affordable housing, and also the Health Impact Project, to develop an intentional health promotion process that really aims to highlight and enhance existing health-related strategies within the LEED rating system. So this process was inspired by health impact assessment, which is a longstanding tool and framework within the public health community. And it really boils down to these 4 overarching steps of engaging the community and public health expertise to understand population health needs and opportunities, and then prioritize action according to needs and evaluate impact. And here, when we refer to population health, we really mean the health of the various populations impacted by an individual project. So that is the health of the occupants and direct users of the building, as well as the community surrounding that building, as well as the supply chain. So we hope that this process helps teams navigate the various existing opportunities within the LEED rating system, but we also hope it helps teams look beyond LEED to build in some of these other new strategies brought to the market from tools like FITWEL and WELL, and hopefully help teams that are interested in doing multiple certifications go about that in the most efficient and effective way. So as I mentioned, going forward, U.S. Green Building Council is working to make some changes to LEED v4 and develop LEED v4.1 to make it a bit more accessible to the market And during this time, our team's going to be working to also increase clarity around the existing health opportunities within the rating system and bring aspects of that health promotion process into the core rating system as well. So that's all I have. I look forward to the question and answer period. You're also free to reach out to me afterwards if you have additional questions. Thank you very much, Katrina, for having me.
Thank you, Kelly. And it's great to see. One of the things I really liked about that is how you've shown that LEAD has been obviously evolving in the past decade, but you're still so conscious of that important balance between human health and planetary sustainability. And I think this is particularly commendable given your presence in, what, 167 countries and territories? Quite
exactly.
impressive scale. Okay, well, great. Thank you so much to our panelists for those presentations. I'm sure we can agree that was a great insight into five certifications that have a different foothold all around the world. And we now have an opportunity to dive into discussions with our audience. And we have some pre-submitted questions as well as loads of questions that have been coming in through the chat box. I'll try and get to as many of the questions asked as possible. So thank you to those of you who've written them up already. But firstly, a pre-submitted question to get the discussion going. But I guess one of the reasons why it's great to have you all together in this session is to demonstrate that actually all of these different rating tools are all working towards a common goal of creating a better environment for people and planet. And it's clear that although there are different focuses to each of these certifications, there are also huge elements of overlap. Now, some of you have touched a little bit on crosswalks in your presentations, but I wonder if you could elaborate more on how you're working together for our audience.
I'm happy to go first if while others are thinking. So I think you've captured it well there. We're doing a lot of work already around crosswalking, which I think is an incredibly important first step to help the industry understand how the various rating tools work together, because what I think is important when we look worldwide and the conversation around health and well-being and sustainability as a whole is that we give the industry the ability to actually decide how and what tools are the most appropriate one for their environment. But I think it's more than just a crosswalk. So if I look at all the people involved in this conversation, from our perspective, we're working with all of them in different ways. So we're working with some talking about sensors and how we can use telemetry in buildings to make better decisions around performance. We're looking at research and how we can work together around research. And it was quite interesting. We had USGBC here on the 4th of July. So Mahesh was here talking about data and data sharing. So I think when the industry looks at us at rating tools, sometimes they see us as competing, yet behind the scenes I think there is such a close collaboration that sometimes isn't seen by the industry, and I think that's a really positive thing, particularly from a WGBC perspective, that there is a large amount of work to make sure that we give the industry choice. So choice is a positive thing rather than actually having single rating tools to drive the conversation. But actually, there's a lot of collaboration, which I think is an incredibly important ingredient for today's societies and today's challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. This is Reena from FITWEL. I'll just add a quick tidbit to that, is that at FITWEL, although our focus is on health, we try to rely on the expertise and unique value of the other certification systems just to add efficiency for everybody. So, you know, systems that have been around for a while, like BREEAM, Green Star, and LEED, all have a particular expertise in the sustainability arena. So there's no reason for FITWEL to kind of reinvent the wheel in that way. And so for that reason, we do accept certification documentation from these other certification systems and trust their kind of rigor and research process.
And I think that also goes the other way around, where, for example, the fact that there's now dedicated health and well-being systems means that for us, for example, in Green Stars, we're going through our review process and revision, and we can look at what Well is doing and FITWEL is doing and so on, and sort of look at where we can draw a boundary that where they can take over and it makes more sense, and just being able to provide the core infrastructure at a building level in a way that enables us to focus on other issues that are also rising in importance without necessarily having to copy them. There's no reason for us to do that. They already do that job very well. And so that relationship definitely goes very much so both ways. And it is that aspect of working together that makes it, I think, a very rich and valuable opportunity for our stakeholders. So we see a lot of buildings here doing that dual health and well-being and holistic environmental certification in Australia, and we aim to work very hard to make that as easy as possible, and it goes both ways on the other side for the other rating systems. And I think it's to also, I guess, add on what Martin is saying, a good example of cross collaboration, for example, amongst rating tools, and I'll pick up on an item that Kelly noted, which is the pilot credit that she mentioned on integrative health environments. That's actually something that we worked with them to develop, and we have a mirror credit in Green Star as an innovation challenge, where we're actively trying to drive a very similar outcome at a market level, and using the benefits and the marketplaces of where both rating tools operate to drive a very similar outcome. And so that happens at multiple levels that maybe are not immediately apparent, but we aim to work as closely as we can with everyone else.
Thank you all. It's nice to hear about the kind of behind the scenes work that's going on between each of you. Thank you for sharing a wee bit on that. Now, we've had a couple of questions that are specifically for one individual panelist. So I'll ask you them now if you can respond quickly, if that's okay, so we can get through as many as possible. Reena, a question for you first about FITWEL. We've had a couple of questions asking about whether FITWEL is accessible for people to use outside the US, and a specific question about the UK, in which there has been a note that FITWEL and BREEAM USA have an alignment. But is there plans for an alignment between BREEAM UK and FITWEL?
Sure. So to answer the first question, certainly there are projects that are using FITWEL on a global scale, and companies using it globally. That's the great thing about our technology, is that it's accessible from anywhere. So any project and any company located around the world can just log in at app.fitwel.org, register their project, and advance through the certification project via that website. Of course, they can reach out to us if there's any questions, but essentially we've set up the system so that that technology is really the only asset that you need, and all of the information is baked into that portal in order to get certification. So certainly we have a large flow of projects advancing through the system in North America, but in Asia, Australia, and the UK as well. And the second question about alignment with BREEAM, I would love that. Martin, I would love to chat further after this call. I think it definitely makes sense. We have a great partnership with BREEAM in the United States. And so I know there's certainly alignment between the systems, and would love to talk about expanding that.
That's be my pleasure. No problem at all.
And actually, Reena, we've just got a comment in the box saying, I can agree that FITWEL works for UK companies. We're a UK company and just got FITWEL certification for our London office. There's an exclamation mark there. And based on the grammar, sounds like they're happy. So thank you for that comment.
That's great to hear.
A quick question for Jessica now. The question is, how many WELL projects are registered in the UK? Sorry to put you on the spot with that.
No problem. As the Chief Commercial Officer, I have all of my metrics memorized. Just kidding. But with a quick check, in all of Europe, we have 260 plus projects that are registered and pursuing well. Some have already achieved their certification, which constitutes just over 50 million square feet. Sorry, I don't have the quick translation to meters there. The majority of projects in Europe are WELL core and shell projects, although we do have quite a few sort of interior fit outs or whole building registrations as well, where you've got a corporate occupier who's certifying their own space. In the UK specifically, we've got about 40 projects that are registered or already certified, constituting just under 8 million square feet. And that's a pretty even split between interior projects and well core and shell projects. So really great representation all across Europe. UK has certainly been strong. Some of the other key markets for us have been the Netherlands as well as France. And then just to sort of add a little bit more color from our perspective, localization is one of our key sort of strategies as well as our key principles for WELL, and we're constantly looking to better localize WELL for use all around the world, which has obviously driven our strategy around partnerships as well as crosswalks, but we also are focused on developing new equivalencies and regional adaptations for our projects around the world. We're constantly working on new translations to the WELL building standard in languages like French and Spanish, but also in Chinese and Japanese and other languages around the world. We also even look so far as to change the spelling and the diction of our presentations and also our materials. So in Australia, we look to customize, and in the UK, we look to customize the spelling of certain words. We also look to assemble global advisory committees, so the researchers and subject matter experts who are providing input to the standard and our subject matter experts on an ongoing basis constitute global representation. And then we also have started setting up local WELL AP groups in different parts of the world. There is one in the UK, there's also one in France, we have one in Australia and a number of other places as well. And then, from a research perspective too, we're constantly looking into the most relevant public health challenges that are being met in different parts of the world and making sure that our standard is flexible enough to respond to those local challenges so that the way that project teams apply the feature criteria can have the most value and impact to their projects.
Great, thank you, Jessica. I'll just hand over one more quick question before we finish off with a couple more broader questions for you to all jump in on. But Martin, a question for you about BREEAM, but is the BRE considering a recertification process to be more like the WELL standard?
A recertification. So at the moment, we have BREEAM in use. So if we go back to that diagram I put up on the screen when I was speaking, is that we see buildings as sort of life cycle. So from new construct through in use to refurbishment. And when we crosswalked between the WELL standard and our new construct and in use standard, 40% of the content of WELL is actually sort of already mapped across to BREEAM. So I suppose it comes back to a comment that was made before. We don't want to make the marketplace crowded by sort of duplicating. It's about how do we find our rating tools? How do we make sure they coexist? And I think the crosswalk is a really good, important part in this kind of journey. How do we make sure that we're driving sustainability either from a health and well-being perspective or seeing it from a broader church in terms of all the other elements of a building? And how do we do that in a way that basically ensures that we give customers what they need? Because the customer base for better buildings, I suppose, is quite a broad church. And from a BRE perspective, from a BREEAM perspective, is very much about trying to provide that sort of that wider appreciation of building performance. So I think we're in a comfortable space at the moment with the work we're doing with WELL and FITWEL and other rating tools to make sure that we can support the industry where they want to dual certify. And I think probably one of the interesting evolutions in this conversation is something we're already discussing with people is, and what's the role of digital? How do we make sure that if we are looking to recertify or actually ensure that buildings are performing more in a real-time basis, how do we use data from our buildings and our telemetry across our rating tools to provide quicker solutions? So if I was looking at product evolution, I would be looking more at a digital way of working rather than actually looking at an analog and sort of historic way of working. If I was giving you an insight into my mind, I suppose.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we've just got about 1 minute left, but we've got so many questions here that we'll just pick up a couple more before finishing off. But thank you to those of you who have joined, if any of you need to dial off exactly on the hour. But we've got a great question here that I really want to pick up, because it's from one of our colleagues at the Kenya Green Building Society, who is asking about whether any of our certifications have done research about affordable homes and whether any of the rating systems we've talked about are engaged in affordable homes. Now, Elizabeth is specifically asking about Africa, and she makes the point that 65% of future development in Africa will be residential. But let's open it. Let's open this up. To start the conversation, has anybody got research they can talk about affordable homes to start off?
I can add a few thoughts here. We've recently done some work in Latin America around exactly that kind of conversation. So, if we look at certain countries in terms of affordability, what's the best way of actually driving that conversation about performance and cost? And the work we did in Latin America was very much around understanding the different levels of return on investment. So what can I provide to the market at a community scale? So is that a heating, lighting, energy storage solution? And then what role does fabricated or pre-designed buildings play? So can I use off-site manufacture? Can I use modular manufacture to actually provide the solution for housing needs in a much affordable way? So if your person from Kenya would like to get in contact, I can equally share some of that research we've done. And I think it becomes interesting that people are starting to see that some of the changes in the way we construct does open up the conversation a much wider church, so that we can actually drive sustainability and performance in a way that's much more accessible. And I think that becomes really important in this conversation. It's something I sort of mentioned in one of my slides, that if we are going to ensure that people understand what sustainability is, it's about having that wider conversation so that people understand, how buildings are performing and the role they play in terms of optimizing that performance, in terms of the way they live in the buildings, how they use those communities. But yeah, we've done some research in that space, if that would be useful.
And this is Reena from FITWEL. So we have as well we do a lot of work with affordable housing, both within FITWEL and then as a not-for-profit organization separately on the research side. So to give a couple of examples, here in the United States, we partnered with Mount Sinai Hospital a couple of years ago and did a research study around some affordable housing that integrated active design principles within their building context. So essentially it was strategies such as including access to healthy food where the neighborhood did not provide access to nutritious foods, providing opportunities for on-site physical activity, locating in a neighborhood that had access to green areas where kids could run around and recreate. And we did pre and post research, and what the researchers found was quite amazing, and it was almost as if we made up the data, although we didn't, where we saw that some folks actually changed BMI categories. So it was quite amazing. And this is indicative of what we're seeing, that even if we're not able to see health impact in a short amount of time, we are seeing a great level of qualitative data that shows impact on things like feelings and how they feel about themselves and their perceptions about themselves. And also I think that when we look at that research and we talk about how those benefits accrue to the different people involved in the project, so whether that be the developer, the building owner, or the community that provides different insurance or Medicare or Medicaid to these residents, that there are many benefits at different levels. So the developer, we found, might say that their tenants are more likely to pay rent because they're missing less days of school, or their children are missing less days of school and they're missing less days of work. So they tend to be more stable tenants. And so, there tends to be, although they may not have a return on their investment because it's affordable housing, they see benefits in other ways.
And this is Kelly. I'll just quickly add that similarly, we've had experiences in the U.S. Applying the health promotion process that I mentioned during my presentation. And one thing that we've seen as a value to placing that process aspect that really highlights a focus on the specific needs and opportunities presented by each individual project is that it is very useful within the affordable housing context, or really any context in which resources are constrained, which is most contexts, but most obvious within the affordable housing context. And so we do have some case studies coming forth that we'll be able to share along the lines of applying that tool within affordable housing projects here in the U.S.
Yeah, and just chiming in quickly, this is Jessica. I know we're over time, but I think from our perspective, what's so great about a lot of the research surrounding healthy buildings is that health and wellness really is universal. And what makes, my lung work in a nice space or a nice hotel, let's say in China, is the same thing I would need in an affordable housing space in New York. And so we can apply a lot of the great research that informed the Well Building Standard when we look at affordable housing projects. We had quite a bit of interest in affordable housing with Well V1, but cost was one barrier, as were some of the mandatory precondition requirements that we had listed in V1. And although we've had a couple of successful affordable housing projects, and even our USGBC partnership in the orphanage in Port-au-Prince, Haiti has been a successful project, we really wanted to focus on making sure that health and wellness could be accessible to all of our projects when we designed Well V2. So Well V2 is more flexible and we think affordable for many different building sectors, including affordable housing. And affordable housing specifically does qualify now for a 35% discount on well fees, which is great. But I think all of us together, sort of getting back to Martin's point around how collaboration leads to market transformation, I think a lot of the great work we can do collaborating is focusing on these deserving sectors, affordable housing, education, healthcare even, and making sure that these standards and criteria and really best practice and research can be applied in every type of space in every part of the world. So that's something that we at IWBI are very committed to.
Great, thank you all. And I'm sure everybody will agree, we've had some great research mentioned by all of our panelists. So perhaps if each one of our speakers wants to maybe send me some links to the research that we've been talking about, because I know that a lot of our audience would like to be able to access it, then I will share that via the World Green Building Council Twitter and my own Twitter next week. And we'll get it up on the website soon, so people can keep an eye out for that, and we'll give you access to that information. So to wrap up now, thank you to all our great speakers from today's session. Martin, Reena, Jorge, Jessica and Kelly, you've been great, thank you. And we've clearly had such an engaging Q&A that we have got so many more questions that we've not had time to answer. So thank you also to all of you who have been a great audience and been really interactive in the question box. I hope you've all found it a valuable and enjoyable session. And don't forget, we still have some more webinars to look forward to. So next week we have the final in our Better Places for People webinar series called Questioning Co-Benefits and asking, can people and planet work hand in hand, which should be an interesting discussion. Our sponsors Velux are also running their second World Green Building Week webinar this Friday around smart nearly zero energy buildings, which will also feature some discussion around active house certification. So please do join me for that as well. Now you can find details on all the forthcoming sessions through the World Green Building Council website and social media channels, as well as recordings of the sessions that have already happened. And this recording will be online on YouTube and the website soon. So thank you all very much for joining us. I hope you found this session enjoyable, and I hope you have a great day and a great World Green Building Week.